today's technology is setting us up for a trepidatious traversal of tomorrow, if we don't reflect and take a different track. What does this mean? Well, in my previous musings, I reflected on the importance of attenuating a depleted mental bandwidth. Depleted mental bandwidth describes a perilous state of being resulting from the favoring of expedience, generally characterized by apathy, less drive, less effort, less decisiveness, and less action. The mechanism for course correcting it was explored through a touch of practicality. Reclaim silence, stillness, and solitude. Be bored, and immerse yourself in dated works of art, such as literature, film, and music, with the aim being to rekindle your ability to sustain an attention span for more than 5 seconds, and reap the gold buried within a flow or immersed state. And contrary to popular belief, that exploration was not purely for the purpose of self-improvement, improved health, and improved quality of life. These were a byproduct of the actual purpose, to reflect on what makes the human existence fulfilling, meaningful, and enjoyable. As such, the following discourse is intended to expand upon this very purpose further. And as a quick note, I do not wish to discount the immense value that technology has provided us. You watching this is a byproduct of it. But I also do not wish to dismiss the crude reality of technological accelerationism and its future impact on society. So without further ado, let's get into it. This experiment, the Universe 25 framework, will act as the framework from which to derive the meaning expressed herein, so keep it in mind. Imagine you had everything you ever wanted. Food and water always available. Shelter always available. Mating options always available. Never overly cold, never overly hot. While it might sound as if I were describing the circumstances of humans in most developed nations, I'm not. At least, not in respect of humans. You see, I was actually describing the circumstances of rats. Yes, you heard that correctly. I was describing an experiment conducted by John B. Calhoun, referred to as Universe 25. I came across this from Ted Joyer's article on the topic, Is Silicon Valley Building Universe 25, to which I defer to. And to ice the cake, consider this quote from Joyer. The last living mice in Universe 25 were totally antisocial. They had been raised without maternal affection and nurturing, and grew up in a society of extreme narcissism, random violence, and disengagement. Sound familiar? Applied to the present societal constitution, and as Ted observes in his commentary, there is a remarkable similarity applied to us humans. As indicated by Ted, people have also become more solitary. Intimate relationships are on the decline, all while leisure time and the satisfaction of material needs and desires have increased. Perhaps most interesting is that the deepest relationships most have now are with their devices. I've mentioned this in my discussion on the favouring of expedience and the art of communication already, which you can find somewhere within this video or in the description, so I won't drill it in any further. However, consider Ted again. Like our mouse utopia, the phone provides for all their needs. Whatever you want, a pizza, a driver, a lover, a game, there's an app for it. Who needs friends and family? Just so long as you've got the latest iPhone. Let's factor AI into this equation. It is inevitable that it replaces vocations. It is also a matter of time before it is embedded in our societal framework. The various thoughts of Elon on the matter make that ever more palpable. And with such developments comes a life where our material needs and desires are not only satisfied, but many individuals' purposes are displaced. It truly is the next stage of human evolution and natural selection. And with that comes Ted's next statement. Humans are so much more complicated than mice. So if mice need challenges and obstacles in order to flourish, we need them all the more. People are not built for passive lives. And the tech billionaires who are chasing this, out of greed, not benevolence, are courting disaster. This naturally leads one to ask, if having everything we want is not conducive to a productive and meaningful life, then what is? And to explore that, I refer to a particular Art of Manliness Sunday fireside. One may lead their life scavenging through piles and mountains of written pages, philosophers, and historians to arrive at an answer on how to live a fulfilling life. But the truth is, there is never actually an answer. There are multiple answers, one of which has resonated with me. Bundled together, I refer to it as the Fantastic Four. I'll make it simple first and then explain. Something to live on, something to live by, something to live for, someone to live them with. According to Otto Paul Kretzmann, a professor and pastor of the mid-20th century, he considered the first three as a requirement for man to survive, flourish, and stay sane in the modern world. The art of manliness contributed to the last. And to all, I completely agree. We'll dissect each one respectively. Something to live on. Fulfillment is hard to grab a hold of amidst a paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Something above a grinding, subsistence-level income is required. Money may not directly buy happiness, but by keeping the spectre of worry and stress from darkening one's doorway and providing a springboard to interesting, adventurous, and joy-inducing pursuits, it provides the conditions that make it far easier to obtain. It's unbelievable. What a phenomenal quote. At its surface, it means having the means and resources to sustain oneself. A modern translation, money. It is an essential foundation to obtaining fulfillment or the good life because fulfillment is hard to grab a hold of amidst a paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Something above a grinding, subsistence-level income is required. And obviously this is stated in the context of modern society. One can forego these requirements if they wish to live the hermetic life, voluntarily ostracized from the modern world. Now, depending on your relationship with money, then you might consider that money does not buy happiness. But in my opinion, this is only partially true. That is because money allows one to alleviate the worry and stress associated with surviving and focus on flourishing. Money provides the conditions that make it far easier to obtain fulfillment. In addition to echoing the sentiments of the art of manliness, I'll add my own contribution. It does not take a scientist to realize that mainstream social media and frankly mass media do not truly incentivize that which provide fulfillment. The idea that you need exorbitant amounts of money, fashion, cars, goods, possessions, materialism, consumerism, to live a fulfilling life is a fallacy. What does that say about society's ideals and value system? I divagate. How would I know that? Because, for example, if you consider an interview with those who've crossed the 15 mil per year barrier, they've found that through personal experience, that whether they make 1.5 or 15 million, it interestingly does not make that much of a difference. This was extracted actually from Ali Abdaal's newsletter. The particular release I unfortunately am unable to hyperlink, but if you do enough digging, I'm sure you can find it. Rather, most realized that in order to get there, it would cost them the elements that would provide them more fulfillment, which were more enriching and fulfilling relationships, the time involved to nurture those relationships, less stress, and a less demanding schedule. So, while you require a solid foundation of resources, do not inflate just how much you need to obtain fulfillment. Something to live by. It's hard to find your way without a map, a compass, a set of signposts. It's hard to generate the force so primary to human happiness, momentum, when every decision must be made and remade from scratch. Every man needs a set of non-negotiable principles, born of well-earned convictions to guide him. Every man needs a code. This deserves no further expounding besides the following. It would be wise to accord by non-negotiable principles. These must preferably be developed through experiences and well-earned lessons, for these constitute the valuable nectar from which the principles derive their meaning. Though, these don't necessarily need to be permanent, but steadfast. Individuals change, or so at least they should. Something to live for. Life becomes an empty slog when it consists merely of the maintenance tasks necessary to perpetuate it. A man needs a purpose larger than himself, ideals he can never reach but find satisfaction in striving toward. A compelling reason to get out of bed in the morning. Work that makes a difference. People who need him. I'll reiterate something so profound from this. An individual must have ideals he can never reach but find satisfaction in striving toward. That is a statement which, after reading, I've decided to live by. That's been expressed in many different variations, but its essence has remained as powerful. Fulfillment is arrived at when toiling at something. That is beyond the maintenance tasks required to sustain an existence. Hear that again. And it is also less mystical than purpose. It's more specific to the human experience. What I mean by this is, a pen has a purpose to write. If it fulfills that purpose, then its purpose is accomplished. For example, this pen accomplishes that purpose. It's quite a beautiful one, I must admit. But it's difficult to say the same for a human, because there isn't just one purpose, of course. At a biological level, one of our purposes is to reproduce. That's generally contained in every individual that's born. But what about at a spiritual level? What about at a metaphysical level? What about at an existential level? What about at a chemical level? Or what about at a psychological level? There are multiple perspectives that will each ascribe a particular purpose on a human, which is why I consider purpose inappropriate. What you can say, however, is, I have something to strive towards. And the multiple purposes that a human can possess will assist in achieving that. Even further, this perspective allows one to shift away from a narrow-focused, purpose-only view to recruiting all the relevant purposes that a human can to best tackle one's aim. By sheer example, you can't become the world's greatest lyricist, Eminem, without a team or a support network, such as Dr. Dre and his early friends, or the knowledge that something will outgrow you, such as his children. While they may seem to be a distraction from your path, realize that other purposes are only getting you closer to your ideal by fueling disparate, inescapable, yet essential aspects of life that are intimately connected with the maximization of your potential and ultimately fulfillment. Someone to live them with. And in dovetailing from the example of cultivating relationships to achieve the best that you can, I'd like to emphasize that it is one thing to have something to live on, something to live by, and something to live for. But as the Art of Manliness rightly noted, they often mean very little if you do not have someone you love to live them with. And that deserves no further explanation. How to discover the Fantastic Four. I've recently been reading, among other things, Vizi Andrei's book, The Sovereign Artist. What compelled me to do so was his Sovereign Artist Edition 9. In it, he touches on important themes which I consider of utmost importance contemporarily. These include boredom, silence, and leisure as the key ingredients to a more fruitful creative life. I've already touched upon that in a previous episode. You can click that either here or in the description. Play as a key constituent in productivity and creative work, and the value of a simple, slow-lived life. Whilst not explicitly stated, these themes reveal broader truths about the nature of the human experience and what characterizes a fulfilled human condition. I've already expanded upon the value of the first point in my previous episodes. So in answering the question of how to discover the Fantastic Four, I'll consider the latter two. Play. You're free if and only if you failed to make the transition from the playground to the workplace. That's quite powerful. While it might sound heretical, the eradication of play from adulthood is not a commendable marker of growing up. It renders one robotic, predictable, and incapable of being creative. I'd argue it renders one more amenable to the subjugation of their will for that of another. And in the context of a conventional corporate workplace, as Vizi references, this is exactly what is required to be a competent employee. I'm completely aware that there are exceptions, of course. Though, for someone who's qualified in law and worked in the space, I've seen it firsthand. Nevertheless, I take a particular liking for the creative realm. And situated in that context, divorcing any sense of play from creative or even non-creative work is only likely to produce poor output. To play is to explore. To play is to experiment. To play is to be eclectic. It does not mean assembling toys on the floor and screaming at the top of your lungs as your monster truck wipes out the entire Play-Doh population you've divinely molded together. It does not even mean always engaging in work like it were play. No. It means trying new things. It means revisiting old things in different ways. It means toying with opposing ideas to arrive at unique personal insights. It means attempting to fuse the unimaginable. And, when you really enjoy it, it means unconsciously accessing the flow state. Which leads me to when work feels like play. This is arguably my favorite part. In The Holy Mountain, an incredible film by the way, a potent scene involves the alchemical quest of a holy character transforming feces into gold. Owing to the creative freedom afforded to Jodorowsky, it worked. The process involved the divine character immersing himself in a human-sized scientific beaker and being heated to the point of death, alone, left to his own thoughts, dripping of sweat, borderline hallucinating. I reference this scene as it serves as an apt analogy of how entering the flow state can transform the seemingly mundane or pain or repressed emotions into metaphorical gold. It acts as the primary process allowing the meaningful transformation of input to output to occur. And thus, if play is a means of accessing the flow state, and it were combined with our work, then it can only mean that the quality of our output skyrockets. Not because of anything magical, but because we're reacquainting ourselves with what was naturally the most human form of work and expression. Play allowed for the creation of stories. Play allowed for the generation of myths and folklore. Play allowed for the inventions and innovations. Just ask Da Vinci and his various corpses. So then, it becomes a worthy pursuit to re-enter the playground and exit the workplace. For the playground has no concept of time, only immersion. The workplace has discrete concepts of time. Start at this time, break at this time, end at this time. It should come as no surprise then that when comparing works created through play as opposed to regimented structures, generally, they are leaps and bounds apart. Well, it took me long enough to get here, but as I hope you can now see, play is a key mechanism for discovery. And that may very well be discovering your Fantastic Four. Play allows you to discover meaningful work which provides you with something to live on. In pursuing this work, you'll invariably develop principles to live by, which arms you to embark on the journey of what you wish to live for. And along the journey, you'll encounter and blossom with someone you love to live with. But how does one create the appropriate conditions for play? Well, allow me to explain. Slowing down and being simple. I find intense fulfillment in play, creative endeavors, and being unconventional. I cannot imagine a world in which I did not undertake creative activities. However, the satisfaction to be obtained from creative pursuits is at least partially connected to the output created. If it isn't personally satisfying, no matter the process, you wouldn't do it. Or at least eventually you'll realize you shouldn't do it. Expanding this, a key factor affecting quality of output in creative endeavors is providing your unconscious with the right nutrients, but also the space to digest them. You may be consuming the most symbolically stimulating and nutrient-rich information, play. You may be exposing yourself to the most rich and vibrant human experiences, play. But with no space for them to be digested, other than your dreams perhaps, then you're robbing yourself of deep personal insight. Enter the slow and simple life. Slowing down and stripping away the extraneous material provides this space. A long walk, a travel adventure with no destination in mind. Doing things by hand, reading a book in the fields, and, arguably the most difficult, doing nothing. Such activities provide the appropriate counterbalance to a life of fast-paced rigidity and haste, and the space for the jewels of your own insights, as well as divine intervention, to reveal themselves to you. In saying this, however, I've recently come to realize that fostering a lifestyle which allows a homeostatic relationship between a fast and slow life has produced the most impact, and is most suited to an ambitious temperament. Translated out of my style, it means that while I'm conscientious, I'm conscious. That I can't sustain anything effectively without rest, space, and time for myself and interests. Periodizing seasons of a fast life and a slow life do wonders, if you are afforded the flexibility to do so, of course. So slow down and get playing. We've reached the synthesis. If a fulfilling life depends on having something to live on, live by, live for, and someone to experience them with, and the means of determining the first three requires deep thought, reflection, and the last, the savouring of life, and the means of accessing deep thought and reflection often involves slower, considered, human-centered living, and the means of savouring life often involves playing and experiencing freely, then there is immense value in periodizing slower, considered, human-centered living rich in play and experiences. Further, if the future of tech is to progressively gorge your mental throats with the semblance of these three criterions on your behalf as the antidote to your fulfillment crisis, And the mechanism for doing so is by keeping you as ensconced within your tech utopia as much as possible. And the mechanism for doing that is by hijacking your dopamine signaling to favor immediate gratification and impulsive thinking. B, which deprives people of agency and control over their environment. C, and cuts them off from their community and intimate relationships. D, ultimately depriving one of all higher order aims and vocations. And that was derived from Ted Joyer, by the way. It then follows that a major counterbalance to the technological accelerationism is to slow down, be bored, embrace silence, spend more time in nature, surround yourself with beauty, including people, play, embark on new human experiences, and rejoice in that which constitutes the human experience more often. These provide you with the natural fodder to discover something to live on, for, by, and someone to live them with. And once discovered, allows you to orient your life toward a direction. For just because the technological utopia, Universe 25, can eradicate the requirements of flourishing as a human, such as social skills, physical skills, mating competence, applied effort, the building of character, it does not mean that they're gone. In other words, if the requirements to actually live and flourish disappear as a result of Universe 25, it does not mean they're solved. Thus, by embracing the counterbalance mechanisms aforementioned, the end result, hopefully, is that you can control your tech, your sanity, and your life. And now, I'll end with this quote from Ted. "The only thing that gives me comfort is the knowledge that we are smarter than mice. This would be a grand time to prove it."